Brian Winnikins, we are at Commodity Classic, and we are at the Stuart Peterson booth. Bryan Doherty joins us, and we've always enjoy our conversations with Brian as we talk a little bit about the markets. And Brian, on this Friday at Commodity Classic, markets were kind of, it was a ho-hum Friday.
Yeah, ho-hum Friday. Not a bad Friday at that, though. We had some push down in grain prices yesterday, and saw a nice recovery late in the session, finished the week on a decent note. Not bad for this time of year, especially in front of what appears to be, I'm going to say, a faster and faster pace of harvest in South America. But some rain delays this week did also provide some support.
I know during one of the sessions here at Commodity Classic, Max Armstrong was talking about this, some videos from Brazil with the trucks trying to haul soybeans to port. And on dirt roads, they're sliding off the roads. There's 11 cargo ships stacked up. That's going to, I think, if I'm not mistaken, could move some demand back our way.
Well, it could. The other thing that nobody's really talked about is also the relationship of the Brazilian real to the U.S. dollar, in which the real has gained on the dollar in recent months. And that, too, has kept our export market active. But he's right. There's been quite a bit of rain in parts of Brazil, in particular Mato Grosso, key growing areas. The road system is less than ideal. Yeah, you see the graphics. The pictures are pretty graphic. Trucks slid sideways, roads with washouts in it, those things. That's not untypical. So it's to be expected. They just don't have the infrastructure, and one has to wonder why they keep pushing ahead with bean production. Well, the demand is there. That's why, hopefully, for the farmers' sake, the infrastructure comes. But it's a long ways off from being anything close to what we have here in the U.S.
Now, obviously, you handle the markets, but is that also those pictures we're seeing a warning to all of us in the United States about our infrastructure? Of course, on our side of the state in western Wisconsin, we have some lock and dams that are pretty old, and that river is the interstate highway, so to speak, for all of our exports and even imports of inputs.
Yeah, it certainly does remind us how important infrastructure is. And, there's been talk of increased infrastructure spending and build it up. But, when you get aging roads, aging bridges, aging transportation methods, that certainly has to be, I think, a priority for corn and soybean producers here to really push Washington and their elected officials to consider just how important that is, not only to the United States, but to our security and also to feed the world. It's just critical. And when you see a truck in Brazil slid off a dirt road, you can just imagine the headaches, not only for that trucker, but all the trucks behind him trying to move, the farmers trying to get their crops out of the field. Then you get wet weather. It's just a disaster. So those things are supportive for U.S. prices. Some. They're not macro market changing effects, but they certainly will have some impact on price.
I know you and I have talked about this in the past, and that's China. And this big carryout that they supposedly have, this big supply that they supposedly have. And you're one of those that say, yeah, okay, they may have this large pile of corn, but it may be absolutely worthless.
Well, if we go back in history 10, 20 years, one of the more challenging things that I think the USDA, as well as private analysts, have been challenged with is trying to really get a good handle on what kind of supply numbers or inventory numbers are actually in that part of the world, being such a closed-off society. And so the numbers that we work with are what the USDA has. How accurate they are, geez, there's enough question on accuracy here in our own country. So when you look at that big supply of corn that's on the books, I think anybody that's just got common sense will have some healthy skepticism to the quality of that corn. If, in fact, it could be multi-years worth of supply, how long do they expect that supply to hold up? And so consequently, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with the numbers. I'm questioning the quality of the corn, and I think with some anticipation would suggest that if they have a tough weather market or any kind of less than ideal growing conditions, the markets are going to respond really quickly here at home.
Talking with Bryan Doherty from Stuart Peterson. Of course, they're in West Bend. And Bryan, while you're here, and you've had a chance to talk with corn growers, soybean growers, wheat growers, sorghum growers as well. That's one of those that you probably don't get a lot of questions on. But what are some of the questions that farmers are asking you?
Well, the obvious question when they come to a booth like ours is the first question is where are the markets going, or will we see $4.50 corn or $5 corn, or what do you think? And so I'll answer that question generally with a question and in a nice way and say, well, why does it matter to you? So then I get the real kind of juxta the question is, I've got corn in storage, I'm thinking of selling, or I sold some. Do you think I should sell some new crop corn or beans? Bean prices are attractive on new crops. Should I lock some in? All really good, thoughtful questions. So usually when I get an outlook question, I want to dig a little bit deeper because I want to understand the motivation behind that question. So then I can give a more coherent and succinct answers to, well, maybe these are some suggestions for you to handle it. Let's face it, when you're trying to outguess the market over the next 30 days, 60, 90, a year, there are so many variables we don't even know of or we can't think of that could affect the market. But we have to make generalized assumptions. So what we do is we go back and take a look at history and say, well, what happened with this type of carryout, what's happened historically, and at least it gives us a bit of a roadmap so that if the market begins to move to a certain level and we see that the funds are close to record long, that the market's very vulnerable to a break. So the questions we really have are, where's it going to go, and then what should we do with it?
And that's really the key, I think, for yourself and all of the employees at Stewart Peterson is you're big on education and how the markets work and how producers can take advantage of those markets, yes, to make money, which is incredibly important, but also to protect themselves.
Not only to protect themselves, we call that shifting risk, but to manage those opportunities, profits when they come along. And it's interesting because a lot of times when people will ask me, well, where do you think the markets are going to go? And I give them an answer. If it's one that they like, they're like, great. But I'll ask them a follow-up question. Well, what are you going to do if that happens? And I kind of get the shrug, well, it's just better. Okay, well, what are you going to do anything with it? Because last year, I can tell you if I asked, let's say, 25 farmers when corn was under $4, if corn could get to $4.45, how much would you sell, or would you sell? And the question, I'd undoubtedly sell a lot of corn. Well, last year we got to $4.45. We took a lot of phone calls when corn was back under $4, when they didn't sell corn at $4.45. So there was a desire, a need, a want. Our point is just use that education to exploit the market and harness that volatility and those opportunities and do so in a meaningful way with your tools that you can use at your disposal. So if the market goes to where I think it will, or you think it will, or somebody else thinks it will, what do you do with it? And make sure that you have a very succinct plan that covers the up and down at that point.
I think the big thing is the big key for farmers, and dairy farmers have gone through this. We've had the rise. Now we're starting to go back. Having someone like yourself or someone from Stewart Peterson, you guys, no offense, you're just not emotional about this. You're just kind of like, this is the plan, follow it. Where farmers, they have that emotional attachment and they kind of get nervous, and that's where you can take that out of saying, look now, I know you want to have another 50 cents a hundredweight or another quarter cent or another cent a bushel, but here's our plan. You really need to follow it.
Well, for sure. And the emotion part is huge because we do understand that farmers are human and you don't want to make mistakes. You don't want to sell too soon when things start to look strong and look stupid. And then if you don't sell, it goes down. You don't have enough sold, so it gets emotional. That's the business of commodities. It's funny, you talk about emotion and strategy, and I'll use a sports analogy, but when I'm watching the Packers here in the playoffs, and you look over the sidelines, and a big play happens, crowds going wild, and you look at Mike McCarthy, he is staring down at his play sheet, and he's preparing the next strategy, and he's talking to Aaron Rodgers or whoever, and they're talking about the next play, the next strategy, and what they're going to do if the ball gets wherever. It's the same thing really in marketing. We're prepared for touchdowns or first downs. What are we going to do when we get it? And have that next play ready to go. And so with farmers, one of the things that we've always noticed, it's human nature, is that when prices become acceptable or good, they often become complacent. Human nature. That's where your maximum risk is, though. When prices are good or at levels where you can really do some really solid risk shifting or damage to the devil in the detail of how's he going to take that money away from you. That's where to work with it. And so we really encourage producers to recognize that marketing is a full-time job. You got to stay at it. It's a consistency. You're not going to win on every play, but you'll surface over time to the top.
Just because you score a touchdown doesn't mean you've won the game. It's pretty simple. So, Bryan, if producers would like more information or maybe give you a call and kind of go through some of that, how can they do that?
Well, it's simple. We're in West Bend, Wisconsin. They can simply call our office. 800-334-9779 is our 800 number. If you want to ask for me, ask for extension 129 or ask for Bryan Doherty. And I'd love to spend 2 to 4 minutes just kind of running through just a few questions to get a kind of a vision of your farm operation. And then I want to hear what your concerns or needs are for the next 6 months, year and a half. Or it could be right now. Maybe you got a lot of grain on hand and wondering what to do with it.
Great. Bryan, again, as always, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you, Bryan.
Bryan Doherty with Stuart Peterson. We're at Commodity Classic. I'm Brian Winnekins on Real Country 1430 WRDN.